Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So if you're watching this, thank you so much for clicking on. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to my channel where I talk about all things social work. I try and do videos at least once a week, which has been working well so far. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about some tips, some hints for student social workers who are currently on their placement or who will be going on to their placement. And it's going to be a really informative video, so make sure you have a pen and paper. Actually, one second. Make sure you have a pen and paper to make some notes, because I'm going to be dropping some really good gems. So as I've said in my previous video, in the UK, social work students have two placements that they do. The first one is around 70 days and the second one is around 100 days. And those placements can be done in either a statutory setting, so a government working for the government, working for a local authority or a council, or it can be in a voluntary setting, so that can be working for a charity, working for an organisation that doesn't have statutory duties to support service users. So an example of a statutory placement would be, say, being working for children's services or working for adult services, whilst an example of a voluntary service might be working for an advocacy service or a advice line. So in your placement, make sure that you offer to do something. So that could be a presentation, that could be doing some direct work with a child or an adult, or it could be finding a new resource or service for the organisation that you work for. So an example was when I was on placement working with adult services, I would do some research on the services in the area, so the local services where, for example, you could get funding, or the local services such as advocacy, or the local charities that were in the area, the local voluntary services that were in the area, and you can just compile a list that can be used as a really helpful resource for your team. And what I find is that in the process of doing all those things that I've just mentioned, you will be actively hitting your PCF and not reactively trying to address it at the very end. I can do a separate video about PCFs and maybe about trying to hit your PCFs if people want me to do that. You can either leave a comment or just DM me on Instagram. For people who are wondering what PCFs are, it's your professional capabilities framework, and that is what you are measured against as a social worker. So there's 9 domains that you need to follow, that you need to hit. I'll try and insert it on the screen, but it's the guidance / framework / levels of social work in England that helps to define your capabilities as a social worker. So it is really important, especially being a student social worker, that you're evidencing that you can hit those different 9 capabilities, because it helps to understand what your competency is as a social worker. So an example of something proactive that I tried to do when I was on placement was that I made a design for seeking feedback from service users, and that is something that is really quite important, something that is really quite driven within your social work degree, which is getting feedback from service users. So I kind of modelled, I think it was like a questionnaire, but it was really focused or tailored towards the service users that I was working with. I think at the time it was children, so it was, you know, quite child friendly, and it was an opportunity for me to get feedback from the child, and I can just kind of slot it into my portfolio. Something else that I would say to student social workers is to not just stay with your work-based supervisor. So for those of you who don't know what a work-based supervisor is, a work-based supervisor is someone who is allocated to you on your placement. They are someone who preferably should be within your team, and they will oversee your placement time with you. So it could be the team manager, it can be the assistant team manager / senior practitioners, as they're called in some local authorities. It could also be a social worker within the team. And to become a work-based supervisor, you have to have done it's a course called, but yeah, so you have to study, I think for me it was about a couple of months. As you're studying to be a work-based supervisor, you have a student who's allocated to you, you have an assignment that you need to do. So why I was even going with that is just to make sure that you are not just staying with your work-based supervisor, because if they've got an emergency that they need to go to, or a visit that they need to do, or they were sick or they were on annual leave, then you don't want to be walking around like a lost puppy because you've been so attached to that one person. Make sure that you're networking with the other social workers within the team. Make sure that you're utilising the knowledge and the experience of the other social workers who are within the team. Don't just entirely rely on your work-based supervisor, because yeah, like I said, when they go or they're not available, then you don't want to be disadvantaged. So something else I live for as a student social worker is supervision and utilising supervision. Now, for me as a work-based supervisor, supervision, again, I'm going to use the phrase, is a safe space, an opportunity for me to understand the student. So from a student social worker's perspective, that's your opportunity to run through things that are happening with the person who's supervising you. It's about making sure that you're on track with your portfolio. It's about making sure that you're on track in terms of your placement, so that you're understanding your placement. There's no issues that need to be teased out or addressed at the very beginning rather than at the very end. Supervision is just like a really good time to iron out those little creases that could become a significant issue in the future. So my advice to you would be to make sure that when you have supervision, which should be regularly as a student social worker, make sure that you're utilising it, and also make sure that you're prepared for supervision. So you can come in with an agenda, some things to talk about, so that the time that you have with your work-based supervisor is meaningful and you're actually getting something out of it. It's of benefit to you. So another important point that I have is around networking. Now, make sure to network whilst you are on your placement, especially if your placement is somewhere that you could either see yourself going into, or it's an area as a location where you could see yourself going into once you've qualified. It's really important to know the professionals that you're going to be working with, or that you may be working with in the future. So network, speak to the agencies that are involved, go to the meetings, meet them, ask to shadow them, ask to see what their service is about, because again, going back to the PCFs, it's about making sure that you're able to evidence that you're able to meet certain parts of those domains, but also just giving you something to do. I mean, yes, you're in a social work placement, but that doesn't mean that you can't use your initiative to explore other agencies that are involved or connected, or to branch out. Use that as your opportunity to really understand the different aspects of social work and the different pockets of social work also. So you might have gone into it thinking that, you might be in a statutory placement, child placement for example, and you've gone into statutory and you're doing that on your placement, but actually within your placement you're able to shadow, I don't know, the police, or you're able to shadow a school, or you're able to shadow another service attached, and you think, oh, hold on a second, I think I might be better suited to that organisation or that service or that branch of social work rather than what I'm doing. Use it as a broad opportunity to fully understand social work, especially because, as I always say, and I've probably said in my previous videos, social work, or the social work degree, does not fully prepare you for the social work role. So making sure that you can utilise the time that you have on the field, on the front line, is always really good to get that experience. And in addition to that, let's not forget that when you are applying for your social work job, and again, I'll be doing another video on that, but when you're applying for your social work job, and let's say, for example, you don't have any prior experience, any future employer is going to want to know what kind of experience you've had. And if the only experience that you've had is your placement, then you need to make sure that you've gotten a really broad range of experience whilst you've been on your social work placement, which is why I emphasise the art of networking, so that you can put on your CV, you can put in your application, yes, I was working in this organisation, but I had a lot of transferable skills, or I had experience with shadowing this service, or I had experience with that, I had experience with this, and it really helps, it all really adds up. So another point that I have is about being organised. Be organised. If you have 70 days or 100 days as your placement, I know sometimes you go into it and you think, 70 days or 100 days, that's fine, that's more than enough time. Trust me, it's not. The time goes really, really quickly. So make sure that you are organised from the very beginning. If there's assignments that you need to be doing alongside that, make sure you're organised with it, because when you're doing a 9 to 5 placement and you're also trying to do your assignments on top of that, sometimes it can become a bit much. So make sure that you're organised with the deadlines that you need to be doing for your assignment. In relation to the work that you need to do for your portfolio, you need to make sure again that you're organised, so that you don't have a mad frantic rush or panic at the end when you're trying to get all your material together, you're trying to get all your evidence together, and you haven't done that throughout. So in your third year especially, you need to show that you can be proactive, because the jump from being the space of time from being on your third placement to your first qualifying job could be a matter of months. So you do really need to be evidencing that you can be proactive. You need to be evidencing that you can be organised, and for your own sanity, for your own sake of going into the world of social work, you want to make sure that you've started those skills. You want to make sure that you've started building on those skills, rather than getting into a qualified job and then feeling stuck. Because what I found with some of the students that or some of the newly qualified social workers that I've come across, is that their social work placement has not prepared them for being a newly qualified social worker, and they do really struggle. So all of the above that I've mentioned, make sure that you are really kind of utilising it and putting your all in, putting your effort in, because you just don't want to struggle when you become a newly qualified social worker. I would also say, make sure that you give 100% into your placement. Don't be half-hearted with it. Don't go into it thinking, this is just a placement. Like I said, it's only 70 days. It's only 100 days. I'll just do what I need to do and then I'm off, I'll apply. No, because for starters, it's obvious when you're not putting your work in. Secondly, this is the job that you want to do, isn't it? You want to be a social worker. There's going to be hard work. Starters, you need to go on. Don't go into placement thinking, I'm just going to sail through. I'm going to do it easy. Because when you come into the real world, when you've got your qualified job, you will soon have a short, sharp shock when you realise how difficult it is. So like I said, it starters, you need to go on. So another thing, which I know loads of people, especially me when I was a student, we can sometimes struggle with, and that's questions. Ask questions. That's what you're there to do. You're there to learn, you're there to get experience, you're there to ask questions, you're there to understand what you're doing, understand the process. So ask questions, always ask questions. Now, I know that's easier said than done, because if you're not confident, you may not feel that you're able to ask questions, you may not feel that you're able to maybe approach people when you can see that they're really busy. But you need to understand, or you need to begin to understand, is that the people that you come across, or the people that you're working with when you're a student social worker, they're qualified, they've got their degree, they've done all the hard work. Whereas this is your time to get into the same position that they're in. So if you have the mindset of, I don't want to bother people, or I don't want to ask too many questions because people, I don't want to disturb people. No, you have to disturb people. That you have to. Take it from me, you have to disturb people, because it is important that you're understanding. It's important that you're doing everything and anything that you can do to make sure that you pass that social work placement. And asking questions is the the best ways that you can learn, one of the best ways that you can understand, one of the best ways that you can really maximise on your time there. I know question is silly, I know people have probably heard of that phrase, no question is silly. So ask questions, and also challenging people. Now again, similarly to asking questions, I know that people can find it really difficult to be able to challenge someone, but I love it sometimes, majority of the time. I love it when students challenge me and they say, why did you do that? Why did you do this that way? I love when student social workers challenge me. Sometimes I can hold my hands up in the moment. I'm thinking, hold on a second, who are you to question what I'm doing? I've been doing this for ages. And that's a really defensive approach to have, which I can hold my hands up and say that I sometimes have. But upon reflection, which as a social worker, you should be your bread and butter, reflecting. But upon reflection, there have been times when student social workers have asked me things, or just spurred some thinking in my mind, and I thought, oh, why do I do this that way? Or I never thought about it that way. So it's always good for someone to come in with new ideas or a new pair of eyes when you've been so kind of maybe stuck in doing things a certain way, and you've not had that kind of second person, because especially when you are shadowing social workers on visits, you don't really have that opportunity to have someone come in and maybe observe your practice and give you feedback on your practice. And that should be something that as social workers we should all be able to embrace, is getting criticism, getting feedback, being challenged, healthy challenge, should I say, because yeah, it's helpful with our growth and it's helpful with our development. So yeah, questions and challenging, don't be afraid to do. So another point that I have is about understanding the opportunities that are being given to you. Now, when I was a student, I remember people used to say to me, oh, you should do X, Y and Z because it'd be great for your learning, or you should go and do that visit because it'd be great for your learning, or you should make that phone call because it'd be great for your learning. And as a little meek social worker back then, or student social worker back then, I used to be like, oh yeah, not really understanding what the purpose of that task was, not really understanding what learning I could get from that task. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you'll find that you are being given the work that no one else wants to do. So if that's the case, then you just need to respectfully say to people, okay, I'm happy to do that task, but can you just help me to understand what I will learn from that? Or can you just help me to understand how I can maybe evidence that in my PCF? And obviously part of being a student social worker is, especially in your third year, being proactive, using your initiative and understanding and starting to piece those kind of learning opportunities to the evidence on your on the PCF. But don't be afraid to just say to people as they're giving you these tasks to do, oh, can you just help me to understand what I'm gonna, how it's gonna benefit or what I'm gonna gain from it, but what's the learning opportunity? Because what you find if you don't is that you're doing all these random things, and then when it gets to the end and they're saying, oh, have you done this or have you evidenced that, because you've not been able to put 2 and 2 together, you're like, oh no, I haven't done that, or I don't have experience with that, when maybe actually you do. And I think the final thing that I have is about embracing your placement. So embrace the placement that you've been given. It might not be the one that you selected, the one that you chose. For me, I remember in my first placement, I asked to go with, I think it was learning disabilities, but it was given an adults or an older person's placement. And I remember at the time I was fuming. I was fuming because I was like, this is not what I asked for. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to do older persons. I asked to do learning disabilities. But actually, when I started my placement, I completely loved it. And actually, another thing that I missed out about networking is that if you make a good impression, you could always get a job in the placement that you're in. You could always be recommended in the placement that you're in. You could always get a good word in the placement that you're in. So for me, when I finished my first placement, when I finished my final placement, I was able to go back to the older person's statutory agency that I was working with, and I was able to be an unqualified care manager. So in between the time of finishing my placement and starting my job, which was a good 5 or 6 months, I was getting paid, so I loved it. And actually, sorry, one more final thing that I have is that if you're having any real issues with your placement, make sure that you speak up about it, because I know that sometimes you feel that you don't want to speak up about your placement, or you don't want to make any issues, or you don't want to make a fuss, or you don't want to make a scene because you don't want to fail your placement. You just want to get through it, get to the end of your degree, and then start your social work job. But make sure that you are raising any issues that you have, because for one, if you sail through your placement without raising anything, and at the end of it you're not entirely ready, that can be quite dangerous when you go into the world of social work, as I put it, and into your first qualified job. Also, if you aren't being treated fairly, or you aren't being treated in line with, say, the university policies, or the expectations of a student, or the expectations of the employer who's accepted the placement, then again you have a right to speak up about it, because like I said earlier, that is your placement experience, that is your time, that is yours, and you need to maximize on the time that you have there, and you need to make sure that you're getting something really useful and beneficial out of it. So yeah, so if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. Again, don't forget to subscribe, and also you can find me on Instagram. But yeah, I'll catch you guys in my next one. Thank you, bye.